Hello, welcome to People, Planet, Profit, a podcast by EarthUP, where we aim to help businesses and people like you simplify sustainability. EarthUP CEO Stephen Bay will be joined by special guests to break down some of today's biggest topics affecting the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profits. What does a sick building do to your health? Why should corporations be invested in biodiversity? How can I help create better working conditions and happier employees at my company? We'll cover these questions and so much more in a candid conversation about reshaping work culture into a landscape that prioritizes people and planet without sacrificing profit. Our next episode starts right now.
Hey, it's Stephen Bay, CEO of EarthUP. Today is a bit of a unique episode in the sense that you're meeting another EarthUP team member, Brooks DePaula. Brooks will be co-hosting this episode with me. Say hello, Brooks.
Hey everybody, this is Brooks DePaula. I am the customer lead for EarthUP. I have a deep interest in performance and health and wellness. My whole life, I was growing up playing competitive soccer, where I actually got my personal training certification at 18. I also studied human biology at the University of Southern California, and then worked at a digital health incubator working with companies like Whoop, Apple, and professional sports teams, as well as elite military like the Navy SEALs and Reconnaissance Marines.
Brooks and I are talking with Dr. Kelly Starrett. Kelly is a coach, a physical therapist, two-time Wall Street Journal bestselling author, co-founder of The Ready State. Kelly is an absolute legend in the wellness space. We're going to get an education on posture, on mobility, and how they affect our work and our everyday lives.
Can't be a legend. Brad Pitt is a legend. I just, shucks. I'm just a physical therapist who's sort of obsessed with foot pressure and breathing and going faster.
Nice. Foot pressure, huh? You're obsessed with foot pressure?
Well, who isn't? What you'll see is, I think, is interesting is that it doesn't matter how you come to this conversation around how humans are interacting with their environment or how humans are functioning, you're going to always come back to core principles. So these foundational pieces around sleep or feeling like you're connected to your community or foot pressure and breathing are two of those, blocks that make up sort of the informed simplicity around how we can sort of create reference positions and reference experiences for people so that they can then tune up and tune down as they need.
That's awesome. And I know firsthand, my life started changing when I went from no support shoes to really supportive shoes. So I understand a little bit about the foot pressure side of things. And Kelly, we know that you are a co-founder of The Ready State. Do you want to tell us a little bit of kind of what got you started and why you're doing the things you do?
Oh boy, buckle up everyone. Here we go. So the Ready State is really about trying to help empower people to be able to own their own physical experience. So if that's, hey, I'm in pain, how do we shift that narrative about what you can do to make yourself feel better? You're already self-soothing. If we start here first about what the Ready State's about, we've been very disingenuous about pain in this country in general. We've basically told everyone pain is a medical problem and it's highly subjective. And we're starting to get better and people are starting to understand that pain is very, very complicated. But what we've really said is, hey, pain is a medical problem and just deal with it in any way that you want. And that has traditionally been bourbon, ibuprofen, opiates, THC. I mean, really, we have been reaching for self-soothing techniques for a long time. And that's really the way to think about it. I even think self-medicating sort of has a negative connotation, but people will default to their training experience. And if we haven't ever empowered people to understand the fundamental messages about pain, then we're just going to keep doing the same things. People will do and reach for the same techniques, and they'll come to believe that pain means injury and pain means damage.
Can you unpack what you mean by pain?
We borrow this from a social theory called normal accident theory, which means that a lot of things that happen to us seem like they're fluke events. I've been doing this my whole life, and all of a sudden running causes me pain. And what happened? What changed? Well, normally it's easy for us to see inputs and outputs. Like if you show up at the gym and you suck today, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And you're like, well, I smashed 3 pizzas and drank 4 pitchers of beer and stayed up till 3 a.m. And everyone's like, oh, that's why you suck today. That makes total sense. Or, hey, I have a newborn at home, or I have a deadline, or I just jumped on a red eye, or I'm under a lot of stress, or one of my family members is sick. It's easier for us to really appreciate these acute, discrete inputs and match that with output. Wattage, power, time, this sort of biomotor expression. This top-down functioning of the brain is really, really powerful. So what we're trying to have people do is appreciate that man, if you're sleep deprived, that's going to raise your sensitivity to threat. And that threat can be signaled as pain. It could be signal as high resting heart rate. It could be as poor sleep. Those are all indicators of threat and strain on the system.
Kelly, knowing that, what do we do about it?
Well, let's control what we can control. Did you walk yesterday? Did you get 8,000 steps? Really, which is our baseline. And it's not about exercise. It's about, these are the fundamental processes that every human being is sort of, wedded to. When you get out of control, because all you have to do is have a kid or start a business or be on a deadline and you'll suddenly feel out of control, we end up on the tail end of having sort of a traumatic event or something that we could have attenuated or controlled or dissipated a little bit, like knee pain. This is why we as physical therapists say sometimes it's really hard to prevent injury. But what we can do is create a more robust person who functions better, who has better durability, who has higher tolerance to these things. And then the brain can sort of top down better auto-regulate these functions. That's a whole lot of complexity. You just want your knee not to hurt so you can go run with your friends. Great. Let's have that conversation. So what we're doing for, step one with the Ready State is, hey, who owns pain? And when do I help understand as a person who's an expert in so many fields, but maybe not in my body, when do I go seek help?
When do you seek help?
This is a really important message for people. If you can no longer go to work because you're in pain, that's a medical emergency. If you can't occupy your role in the family, that's a medical emergency. If you can't do your job or occupy your role on the team, that's what we call injury. And that's when I need to escalate this up the chain. Obviously, you step off a curb and you hear a snap, go get an x-ray. Mm-hmm. Or you've got night sweats, dizziness, fever, vomiting, nausea, things that smell like pathology, like I'm sick, go get help. Or can't occupy my role in society. Now I go get help. That means everything else, I can say, okay, pain is information. And one of our friends says, pain is request for change. So I can use this pain as a diagnostic tool, as a way of understanding that my body's asking me to do something different. So let's get you back to what every human being should be able to do. And I'm not talking about you need to be Simone Biles. Simone Biles has to stretch before she stretches, right? That's how old she is at age 24. I'm approaching 50. What does it look like for me to chase my normal physiology? Being able to put my arms over my head, being able to take a maximum breath, being able to have my hip work really well. Those are the foundations. And it turns out those are the root languages of all sports. Here's inputs and here's outputs. And what you can see is that 100% of the metrics are tracking in the wrong direction. So what we have to ask ourselves is, are these thumbs for nothing, or can we manipulate our environments and change some of these small behaviors that aggregate over months and weeks and years? And lo and behold, the answer is absolutely yes. And it doesn't mean you need to go do high intensity exercise or eat crazy or be keto. It means I want you to eat more fruits and vegetables. I want you to walk more and sleep more. And then we can have the next conversation.
Something you say, Kelly, and I can see you're standing right now, is that sitting is worse than smoking. I would love to have you explain that. I have a stand-up desk that doesn't go quite tall enough, so I'm always sitting.
Let me put some ideas on this for the average person who's listening, because you're like, I'm not sedentary, I'm busy. If you sit more than 6 hours a day, you have a sedentary life. And that's by Harvard. That's not my definition. What we want people to appreciate is it's not even sitting versus standing. It's moving versus not moving. And we can have a clear definition. If you've ever been on an old like elliptical or a treadmill or one of those stair steppers in the old like some crappy hotel, it has METs. You're like, I'm working out at 7 METs. I don't even know what that means, but 7 METs is super hard. MET is a metabolic equivalent. It tells you how much energy you're burning to do this activity. So if you lay down on the ground, that's one. That's a 1 metabolic equivalent, just your body at rest. Standing automatically gets you above 1.5 metabolic equivalents. How about this? Have you ever gone to a bar? Check, probably, you're a human being. They have these things there called bar stools. And if you perch against the bar stool or lean up against the bar with your foot up, boom, above 1.5 metabolic equivalents. Play Nintendo Wii, 1.5 metabolic equivalents. What we're really trying to do is say, hey, how do we get you to be more active in the day? And that means keeping machinery working. So even if you have to sit in a chair, which is common in today's society, scoot to the edge so that your trunk has to work a little harder. And it's okay that you have to work. And when you get tired, lean back, take a break, but then come back in. We are seeing that most people are going to work. And certainly we now have seen a radical change in people's work behaviors from home. And it turns out our homes aren't very set up for this. And because human beings take a lot of cues from our environment, It turns out that if you have a desk that's low, you'll sit there because you're like, oh, here's a chair. I'm on the bus. Oh, there's a chair. So what we like for people to do is to configure their environment so they have more movement choice. Sit on the ground in front of your coffee table, then sit at the desk for a while during a podcast, then stand up, work at your counter, stack up some books, right? Lean against the bar stool, then go for a walk around your counter. So suddenly what you're seeing is, hey, how did I get more movement choice? Because if I said, here are the 3 things you're going to eat every day, you'd be like, dude, I'm going to get so burned out. I'm like, well, that's your body. You sit, you walk around a little bit, you sit and you lay down and you walk around. That's all. So people's movement language and movement choices are very, very typically poorly constrained.
One of the things that we do on our platform is we figure out where people are working inside their house. Are you sitting at a couch? Are you standing up? Are you in a basement that's too cold and maybe in a radon zone? All these different aspects about it. So our company's reaching out to you and saying, hey, Kelly, help us educate our employees on where they should be working from. How do we create a strategy as an organization for this work from home wellness?
Everyone is struggling with the same sets of problems. Suddenly we've changed the paradigm, which is not different than who we were in the 1970s. So in the 1970s, people were like, well, I haven't changed anything. I used to eat a lot of cereal. I used to watch Scooby-Doo until late in the morning. Well, it turns out that we've just slowly eroded some of these behaviors. Most kids don't walk to school, even though they live within a mile of the school, right? So that's a behavior that's changed. Kids aren't playing outside because we have so much rich technology, which is like crack. You would have abused Snapchat at 2 a.m. like your teenage daughter would have. I mean, come on. Like, these things are highly addictive and super fun. This food, I remember when Doritos came out and we were like, this is the greatest thing ever, Doritos. And now we realize that, like, when I have athletes who are trying to put on weight, we give them Doritos because your body doesn't even know what to do with a Dorito. It's like, let's get fat. We change the behavior by substituting in a positive behavior. And what we see is that behavior becomes a lot stickier. So we can do the same thing around the work at home, because what we do see is that people are having to reconfigure their homes, but didn't realize that it mattered in terms of the fundamental biology of their being. When working with companies around these things, we look for the lowest interaction. You have an Amazon box in your garage. Put your computer on it. What height? If you stand at your kitchen counter, your elbow at 90 degrees to the ground, plus 1 inch is the height of your computer. That's a great baseline model. So Stephen, you said something, you're like, hey, my desk is too low. And so I sit down. Yes, your brain is so clever that you're like, this doesn't fit me. These shoes are too tight. I won't wear these shoes. And that was a great solution to that, right? And that's what we see consistently, is that the environment sort of fails to measure up. We don't all wear the same shoes. We all shouldn't be working at the same height desk. But it's also super easy to sit on the floor and work on the floor. And one of the things that happens when you sit on the ground is that you have to do a lot of fidgeting. And you sit kneeling, and then you're squatting, and then you're side saddle, and then you're sitting cross-legged. If you just watch TV tonight while sitting on the ground in front of the TV, use your couch, lean against the couch, or sit on the couch, but don't let your legs dangle off. That's another form of ground sitting. You'll see that you can start to have a conversation about having a healthier back, of having hips that work normally. For example, low back pain is sort of a scourge in America. Companies are just dumping money on low back health. Who looks at the hip range of motion? Who talks about living at some of these ranges? We stand and then we live at 90 degrees where we're sitting in a chair, but your hips go to 120 to 130 degrees. Your hip has to be able to rotate. And most of us don't actually use our hips in those languages. And sitting on the ground basically hits all those things. So one of the things that we can do is begin to say, well, where can I put this into my day so it's not another stinking thing I have to do off my checklist? Because if I give my busy CEO wife a list of activities and biohacking tricks and things, she's going to kill me, right? But I'm like, hey, hon, let's watch TV while sitting on the ground. She's like, I can do that. And that's what I want to do. I want to bury this in.
We talk about creating a more productive environment for people's health as well as for work.
Yes.
I think you talk about that a lot in Deskbound. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, you just hit on the thing. What we should be talking about is not, does this work for pain or not, but does this make you a more rad human being who can get more stuff done? Yes or no? That may be more work. That may be more efficiently working. That may be a faster runtime. That may be more poundage. We always are talking about, don't do this, otherwise you'll get some horrible disease. That doesn't change behavior at all. How do I know? Well, how are we doing on anything that we care about? Once again, if we just apply that in, we're like, ooh, we're not doing great. But if I'm like, I think you could get this job done faster and you could feel better and you could still have more energy at 4:00. People are like, sign me up for that, right? So the thing that I want to talk about is if you restore your range of motion, you're going to restore your ability to generate more force. Ooh, I like that, right? If I configure my environment differently or control my environment in a way that I can actually sleep better, feel better, and actually have some energy at the end of a crazy workday to do something I care about. What I'm trying to tell you is we can think differently about our environments. And that may mean you physically have to set an alarm that goes off an hour before you go to bed to remind you, hey, I need to start preparing my body for sleep, which means I need to go take a hot bath, which means I need to get off the TV. And we just need these cues until we set the behavior. One of the things I like to say is I'm like, one, you should know how to do basic maintenance on yourself. And two, I don't really think you know what you're capable of. Over 50% of the fifth graders alive today are going to be 104 years old. So we're going to have to rethink healthcare, how long we work, the retirement age. And what I want you to appreciate is that we shouldn't be necessarily always playing the game like we did in our 20s, where you could eat anything you wanted, not sleep, and still win a gold medal, because I know those people, because that's how awesome humans are. It's still not the best practice. But when you're in your 30s and 40s, what we're starting to see is, for example, how much sleep you get in your 40s and 50s predicates or predicts what your mental health will be when you're 70 and 80. And in those peak earning windows where most of us start to fall, we start to creep into 40, we start to get powerful, we're good at our jobs, we're really making some money, we're paying off student loan debt, we stop sleeping. And all of a sudden you end up in mid-50s and everything hurts and you're not very flexible and you're afraid to move. And I'm like, well, welcome to the next 30 years of your life where the window gets smaller and smaller. So I'm a physical therapist and I've worked in a lot of inpatient settings and a lot of hospital settings. There's a couple predictors that are really not good for us. If you fall and break your hip and you're over 70, that's the number one predictor of early death, not because of the hip fracture, but because you're going to stop moving a lot during the recovery of that hip fracture. And what we're trying to do is expand this conversation so that we can really take advantage of the fact that most of us are going to be 100 years old or older today. The idea is all of these little behaviors that we can shape our environment with, we just need to let that run in the background as sort of a background computer. Then you can go climb the mountain you want. But let's get to base camp first around these behaviors, and working and getting some sunlight and feeling like you're in a community. Those things are important as some cardiometabolic health.
Kelly, you said something earlier which really resonated with me. You said that we can do this work from home. We can be doing this grinding for a period of time. And then eventually everything starts to hurt. You start to hear about Zoom neck now. You didn't hear about Zoom neck 12 months ago, right? You start to hear about these different issues that people are having at home. And this is true when you're around air quality. If you have bad air quality in your house for a long period of time, you can do it for a while because our bodies are resilient, like you said. But after a while, it starts to wear on your body, right? Your body starts asking for help in the form of pain. What are companies asking you to educate their employees about when they're at home? We're kind of pushed into this with the pandemic. So everybody kind of shifted to home, but there hasn't ever been a foundation for a strategy on how to actually do this effectively. What are the health indicators? I would love to hear you kind of talk around this.
As long as we live in a country where health insurance and the health of my workers is on the bottom line of the company, companies have a vested interest in the health and productivity of their employees. So when we shifted around from let's get our employees to do this and sleep better because we'll have fewer lost days, we'll have less absenteeism and presenteeism, which is when people show up and don't work very hard. But when we switch that to, holy crap, we're actually not getting as much out of these people as we can. They can actually go faster. They get more productive. They can feel better. They can be more stoked. But when you focus it on, let's give people agency again and performance again, then it's really a compelling argument. And so let me give you an example. Last time I spoke in front of this entire Army, senior Army medical staff, I was like, okay, here's your report. 55 million lost user days in the Army from non-combat related musculoskeletal pain. That was 1 million non-combat related orthopedic injuries. And I was like, how's it going? And they were like, just like stoic, stone faced. And I was like, sounds like you're kind of falling on your faces. And it's not their fault, right? It's so complex, all of these behaviors interacting in a way where we don't need more sit-ups and running. We need a whole sort of fundamentally different kind of approach. The Navy Special Warfare started applying a dollar amount to every soldier. So this naval officer SEAL costs $1.7 million to train. She's out on a problem. Well, it turns out that's a $1.7 million asset that's on someone's bottom line that isn't deployable. And guess what? They started really giving a crap about like, whoa, what? How much? We have these 5 people who can't be deployed because that's like $20 million of assets in the field. If people started looking at their best producers as, man, this person goes down or is ineffective or there's a little drag on the system, we start to see big changes in the success of the company.
Me specifically, heavily focused on sustainability, heavily focused on what it means for longevity, right? Sustainability means longevity. How does your indoor environment help you with that? So there's a lot of crossover here.
Yes.
And so I'd like to get your thoughts on the intersection of sustainability and well-being.
If you live in the West right now, you can see that. I grew up in Germany, and right now the flooding there, the 1,000-year flooding in China, we're just seeing that there's another heat dome in the West right now. Something is changing. Climate change is something is happening. We're seeing huge fires. How do we value our future selves? Because I think that's one of the problems fundamentally with climate behavior change and sustainability is that we tend to think our future selves will be richer and have better resources and be able to solve problems better than our current selves. And so we end up sort of discounting. We can just continue to do whatever we want because my future self will be able to handle this. I'll get to it later. This idea of durability and sustainability is really about setting up an environment that organizes and prioritizes your behaviors today for your future self. Yes, I wish that I had started my 401k when I was 20 years old. That's true, I had other things I needed to do, like buy new kayaks and go travel to Nepal and right? I didn't save anything. But all of a sudden in your 30s, you're like, oh, I better have a 401k or someone's going to start that for you. And what we know is that's how we should be thinking about our health. And we have to start rewarding our future selves and future behaviors. And that is really the heart of sustainability. There are some things that are very non-negotiable around your sleep and getting some fresh air, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the things that have made us human and successful for 2.5 million years. We think this is our most important work. I mean, Juliet and I are more and more realizing that if you're obsessed with climate change, we're obsessed with sort of this Anthropocene around the full de-evolution of the human that's currently happening. So this is what I think is the rest of my life's work. And we have to go to the places where the people are, which means schools, which means companies. And I think you guys are 100% on it because I speak to some of the HR managers of some of these big companies. And I'm like, how's it going? Are you spending more money or less money? And they're like, we're freaking out how much money we're spending on this and it's not working.
How can companies start to empower their employees around these different topics?
One of the things that I suggested for one of our nation's spy agencies is they need to have a group of people that come into your house and set it up for you, right? One of the groups we work with is an advertising agency. And what they started doing with their on-ramp with their new employees is they give them a really nice eye mask. And they're like, here's some research and here's some resources, but they're branded eye masks. And then people get an eye mask, a beautiful eye mask, they start wearing it. And then they're sleeping in a dark room and their sleep is better. There's so many ways where we can be thinking about, hey, we care, but we can't just pretend like you're going to get it done. If I tell my kids, Mom and I are going away for 24 hours, don't eat pizza, don't watch TV, they'll be like, sure, Dad, got it. We're going to do it. We're going to make salads and we'll read and play board games. Like said no one ever. So what we do is we assume not the worst of people, but we assume that they're not going to have these agencies or they're thinking this way. So we just don't make this type 1 error in our assumptions about what's happening. We can't just lecture people about sleep. We have to have them begin to become interested in it. People will always do what's best for them, and they will repeat things that work, and they will reject things that did not give them instant gratification. That is good human behavior. If you don't want people to eat a bunch of crap at work, don't bring a bunch of crap to work. And it kind of becomes interesting to say, how do I live a better life? How do I play a little bit better? And suddenly you're like, well, I don't have any plastic bags in the house. I use these wraps and these containers, and then done. You don't have to throw away your plastic bags. Just don't buy them again. You buy something else. Substitute the behavior.
Great. Well, now it's time for the quick hitter section, Kelly.
Oh boy.
So what gets you up in the morning, Kelly?
My kids and my wife, we started running everything through one filter. Does this decision get our family more time together or less time together? And that made a lot of our decision-making a lot easier to understand. And sometimes we have to delay gratification, but it's all comes back to being able to have more time with my family.
What's your breakfast beverage?
I have the greatest cappuccino machine in the whole world. I drink espresso, but I also drink a huge lemon water with some salt first thing, or I have some athletic greens.
What books do you recommend? I know you mentioned one.
Daniel Lieberman wrote The Story of the Human Body. That is an immensely good read about why our evolution has shaped us the way we have. Why do we have big toe? What's going on? Why are we upright? Like, it's super interesting. And then if you haven't read Sapiens, which is a brief history of humankind by Yuval Harari, start there and then just enjoy being rad, because you're going to be like, oh, here I am,
What's one thing you recommend people do in their daily routine that they'd be surprised to hear is actually very eco-friendly?
Sit on the ground. Like, stop it. Stop always sitting in a chair. If you're stuck in a chair, sit cross-legged in the chair. There's a simple test. Can you get up and down off the ground from a cross-legged position without using your hands? Yes or no, 1 or 0. And what you're going to see is people are like, whoa, I kind of struggle with that. I'm like, you should not be struggling with that. You get 1 point off for every hand or point of contact. So your knee goes down, that's a point. Hand goes down, 2 hands go down. You start to add up. The more points of contact you have to get up and down off the ground, the more likely you are to perish early and have a crappy quality of life. And all we're doing is looking at hip range of motion. Come on. These are things you should be able to do. But if you never, ever knew that you need to keep an eye on it, it's not your issue. So we're trying to put that on people's tables.
My wife's going to see me sitting cross-legged in the morning, like trying to get up.
That's right. And you can practice it. Don't worry. You don't have to get an A today. You get an A in a week from now.
Kelly, time for a plug. Any new technology for commercial or residential use that is sustainable?
I think it's interesting that we're seeing big tech companies take a bite of the apple in terms of the wearables, in terms of bringing consciousness, because I think they got us into this and our life is immensely better, oh my gosh, we're sort of de-evolving. I am a fan of eating whole foods. Like, I can't tell you right now, that is the magic, eating food. And I don't really, you're like vegan, you can do it. You're vegetarian, you can do it, but you just got to eat the foods.
So it's fascinating. Truly, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Been a huge fan ever since Mobility One.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's been a true honor to be able to talk to you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you all so much. Thanks. Thank you, guys.
And that's our episode. If you'd like more info about what Kelly is doing with The Ready State, visit thereadystate.com. EarthUP is now live. To jump into the platform and start making change at home and work, go to app.earthup.eco. Become an early adopter and help us create an easier, more effective, and more fun platform for our community. Thank you so much for listening in and for your support. If you like our show, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend, and rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Your support helps us reach a wider audience. So thank you. To learn more about EarthUp and our journey to simplifying sustainability for companies and communities, visit earthup.eco and follow EarthUp on LinkedIn.